Okay, new day, new video. If you watched through my last video, you'll see the next plan of attack is to pull the engine and transmission out of this. So I'm going to do that. I made a few decisions along the way to make this easier, mainly being relocating the brake lines up across the firewall. So normally on a 240, your brake lines run across the crossmember. They come down, they run across, and they run down the car that way. A mate of mine helped me move these up across the firewall here, so that the frame, not K-frame, crossmember, the frame can be dropped out with the engine on it quite easily. Easily. So hopefully that pays off. A few things won't drop down. The turbo side wraps around the rail, so there's no way that's going to come down cleanly, so that all needs to be removed first. Tail shaft needs to be dropped. Front suspension. So I need to drop strut, wheel, all of that assembly down together. And then it should just drop down nicely. I'm hoping I don't need to move any of the cooling system. It should slide down. I think there'll be enough room. Hoses are going to get in the way, but we'll see. But it should, I think, it should clear. So we'll see how it all goes. First thing I need to do before I do that, though, is clean the benches that have built up with crap again, just so I have somewhere to store the parts as I remove them. So I'll do that first. Righto, that'll give me a bit of room to work. First order of business, I need to drain the oil, drain the coolant, pull the intake pipe off. So let's get into that. Okay, progress. I've drained the cooling system and removed any hoses that are in between. So that should be a straight drop down there now. The catch can sticks out past the rail a little. That's going to snag, so that's going to have to come off. I need to do the steering column, fuel lines obviously. But I'm going to move over to this bit next. I'll take all the turbo setup off, pop it on the bench. Seems a logical place to go to next before I start getting under the car. So this is coming off now. I pulled the radiator out anyway, not because I had to, but because I did the same mistake I did last time. When I undo this V-band clamp, I always drop the nut. When I drop the nut, it hits the panel here, it runs down this guard, runs right across here, hits this part, and sits underneath the radiator. I spent hours looking for that last time I dropped it, and yeah, eventually found it there. So this time, not so silly, pulled the radiator straight out, and there it is in the exact same spot. So yeah, it's a fun adventure, but yep, doesn't really hurt. It only took me 2 minutes to get it out, so moving on to the next part. Okay, turbo's all out. Moving on to the next bit, the exhaust hooks onto the manifold here. So I need to take the exhaust off before I can go any further, which is fine. Yeah, I'll get it up on the hoist. Might as well drain some oil and stuff while I'm under there. Alright, ready to drain the oil, and I've done an old-fashioned me again. This isn't the first time I've done this, but check this out. Yep, I haven't loosened that yet. That's just finger tight. It's not leaking though, which is amazing. Alright, I'm just going to let that drip under there for a bit and focus on the suspension. I've just popped the wheels off. My mount bracket to remove the engine I use bolts to here, so I need to take these arms off. Sway bar needs to come off as well because it wraps around. Yeah, a few more things I need to think about and take off, but yeah, that's where I'm up to. Okay, brakes off. Over here. The steering rack is loose. I've drained the fluid from the rack. I've unbolted the rear, pinned the line up, undone the sway bar. Next I'm going to drop the sway bar off, and then I'm going to pull the steering rack off. Alright, sway bar and steering rack's off now. I'm going to take the turbo pipe off now. Oh, the exhaust. The exhaust is going to come off next. While I'm here though, let's have a little guessing game. Let's see if anybody that's watching along, without going back and checking my previous build videos, can identify the parts that I've got here. This rotor's not from this car. This brake line's not from this car. This sway bar's not from this car. These brake calipers are not from this car. A little hint. Yeah. And the wheels. The wheels are not from this car. What are they from? Put it in the comments. Alright, exhaust is off. That bit on the back can stay there. Next is undoing the tail shaft, pulling that out, and we're getting most of the stuff under the car done. Alright, moving along. I've bolted my frame on that I made a while ago to push the engine and transmission around the shed. And I've built this in a way that I could bolt it onto the car as it sat and then lower the hoist with the engine on it. So this is the transmission one that goes on the back, bolts onto the extension housing, and also sort of cups the cross member on the back there. There's another one that I need to bolt onto the front of the engine, and then I tie them together. And then realistically I just lower the hoist, take the engine mount bolts out, take the cross member bolts out, and it's done. Hopefully that works out as I intended. Okay, moving right along, I've unbolted the front arms and I've bolted my frame in. Lens is a bit oily, it's alright. And I've dropped the strut out of this side. I'm just going to do this one now, and then I can finish bolting that frame together. Right, there's the frame all mounted up, tightened up. Uses all the same bolts as what it normally would to hold together, so that should come down nice and even, and I can drop the engine. So the only part left now is the turbo manifold, I believe. I'll just do another check. Oh, and fuel lines. Nearly there. Right, turbo manifold is off, came off beautifully. You can tell it's all been sealed up nicely as well. There's no leaks here at all, so that's come off easily in one piece. So you can see I've got a pretty much straight shot down here. There's nothing that's going to snag. This will have enough flex in it to move out of the way. These hard lines need to be removed because they're hard and they won't like going around corners. Back over this side, I just need to take off that catch cam, and I've got a chassis earth I need to drop there, and the transmission cooler lines, which I forgot. And then it's going to be a fun thing. I've got to try and work out how I'm going to feed that loom through the firewall, whether I pull this plug out and bring it this way, or if I undo everything here and try and just leave it hang. That I've got to think about, because that's not going to be fun, but that's next. Alright, I think that's the end of it so far. The transmission lines are disconnected, it's just dripping a little bit out of the cooler. Everything else, I believe, is disconnected, and it should be a clear shot straight down. I've got the wiring loom pushed out from the inside. It's pretty rigid, so it's not going to all come out. So I'll have to feed it as I drop the engine, but I think we're ready to start putting it down. Okay, that's down now. So it's down on the frame on all four wheels. I have removed the 4 bolts that hold in the cross member, and also the 4 bolts that hold in the trans cross member. So that is effectively free at this point. I'm just going to lift the car off the top and try and feed the wiring loom through as I do it. I'll set the camera up on the tripod so we can record something. There we go. It's out of the car. So now I can start to look at some of these other problems that I have to deal with. But that was a saga. I've been at it for 4 hours. We got to this stage, so pretty happy with that. Alright, I've just capped off all the ports that were left open. So I've got 2 -6s on here that I've put caps on. -8s on the fuel rails, which are capped. And around this side, I've just put a cap with a bit of paper for the feed.
And there's another cap in there for the dash 10 drain from the turbo, so that's going to keep that relatively clean where it matters. I'm just going to degrease that, clean it off, and then I can get this up on the crane and start pulling the transmission from the engine. Fun. Right, so I've soldiered on a little bit, and I've just done a test mount of this shifter, how I expect it will fit nicely. I'm a little bit disappointed with the shifter, to be honest. It seems as though it's one of those situations where when a company tries to make it fit more things, they just make it fit everything badly. It's not supposed to go here, it's supposed to sit further up, but none of the holes really line up where I need them to, so I'm going to have to extend that channel a little bit, because that's got to sit further forward here. And as far as I can tell, this should be tapped. That should have a thread in it. It doesn't, so that's interesting. So the stop screw is not going to do anything, it's just going to fall straight out again when I try and use that, so I'll need to have a bit more of a play there, but it's relatively rigid where it sits, and it's going to operate the way I intended there, so I'm going to just drop the car back down over the top of it, see where this shifter knob pops through on the floor, see if I'm happy with that position before I start adjusting and cutting and tapping anything to suit, but I think that should be pretty good. Okay, I've just put the engine back in its hole. It's just sitting there lined up with the K-frame pins. It's not bolted in, so I don't know if you can see that, but it's just loose. But it's lined up in its spot that it has to be in. The shifter is in. It's a little tall with the mechanism, but there's nothing I can do about that. Short of mounting the transmission lower, which is not going to happen, but that's its finished height. That's in park. I've got room for my fingers. Reverse. Drive. Let's drive there. All the way down to first. Just there, first, second, third, drive, neutral. And then reverse and park. It's not got all of its detents because it's not connected to the transmission yet. It's only sitting on the case, so I just need to tap this bit out a little bit because it rubs. It's not going to be a problem, but the transmission will move slightly. So I just want to that a little bit, and yeah, that's it. That's happy. Alright, after a lot of dicking around, I think I have this in a position where I'm happy with it. I've replaced the 3/8 threaded rod that was here because it was really flimsy, and whenever I tried to change the gears it would just bow out. So I've changed that. I've got a bit of, I don't know what size rod that is, 1/2 inch, I don't know, probably not. But it's the original shifter rod from a Commodore, so it's quite rigid. I spun the ends down just on the belt sander and threaded those. So they're just 3/8 at the end. So that's going to be the weakest spot, but it doesn't flex. I machined out these grooves. Focus, yes. I've machined out these grooves just a little bit so I could slide the plate a little bit further. Everything there fits. I drilled and tapped the holes in the plate here to the size that it says it was, that it wasn't. So that now works. They're jammed in there nicely. I set the shifter height again, so everything seems to work. I don't know if I can actually show it, but and park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then right through down to first gear, first, drive, neutral, reverse, park. So yeah, I mean it's a little bit hard here because it moves a little bit, but in the car it'll be a lot more rigid, but I'm happy with that. I put a couple of tactical bends in this rod as well, just to clear where my fuel lines sort of come up here in the car, so just didn't want them pinching against this hose, so that should be pretty good. And this bend here is just so this doesn't collect on the side of this brindle switch, because it has previously and it broke, so I'm going to have to get another one of these. This has got a crack in it. It still seems to work okay, but the previous shifter that I tried to make work, I've obviously collected this and not noticed, but it's actually bowed that back plate a little bit and cracked the body. So yeah, that's something I have to look at. But yeah, I'm happy with that. I've just tacked the fuel lines back up to the floor. I'm going to spin this engine around again and just do another quick test fit and make sure that this moves nicely, doesn't snag on anything, and then I'll move on to the next step. Alright, I'll just drop the shell down over it again. That's in. It's just got to come up another maybe 10 mil to get bolted in, but it's enough to show the shifter position. So it's in. clears everything. Looks like shit, but that's what carpet's for. So that's good. Alright, now I take it out again and separate the transmission from the engine. Okay, transmission is separated from the engine. Transmission's all looking fine. I have taken the rear main seal off, which was leaking. And there's no surprise it was leaking. It was leaking out of the bottom of the seal here and around the side of the plate. And half the reason that was is because the bolts weren't done up. They were all finger tight. I do that sometimes, so that wasn't good. They're also mismatched, so I don't know what was going on there, but I've got a new plate coming. I've dropped the sump off as well because there's a little pinhole leak on this side that I need a mate to just weld up for me. It's really dirty inside, considering this was all new, or not new, but clean. This here is mostly sand. Focus. Focus. It's mostly sand. And that was because I left this engine open for so long and didn't bother tidying it up. So yeah, there's that. There's a little bit of metal in there, which isn't overly surprising. It does have new rings and everything in it, so that's not really surprising. There's no copper in there or anything, so yeah, all good. That's probably where I'm going to have to stop for a little while because lockdown is stopping me from doing anything else, but I will order a new sump seal because that one was glued really well and I couldn't get it off. And I will, well, obviously this rear main plate is coming in the mail, so I'll do that again shortly. Alright, so I was going to wrap this video up with me getting the engine back in, but yeah, due to lockdown, I'm not going to be able to get that sump dropped off to my mate because I can't get that far at the moment and it's not essential, so that's going to have to go on the back burner, which means I can't get the engine back in. But I did just do a quick test of coil number 8, which is the third wire across here, to green 66. It tests out okay, so the problem must be the coil itself, or I had a bad connection at the time. But yeah, I'll swap the coils once it's all back in and running, but I'm pretty confident to say there's not an issue with the wiring, so I'll leave it there. Like and subscribe. There's going to be more, obviously, so yeah, support me any way you can. Thank you.